everyone, Lu here. If you're new to this video, this is the third entry in a series of reviews I'm doing where I'm reviewing all of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! And potentially GX if this series goes well enough. So linked in the description is the first two parts to said video. Oh, this is also going to be part 1 of season 3 because the story for the virtual world arc is so long that upon reading the story section, I realized that it was way too long to include the entirety of season 3 without making me scream from the editing I'll have to do. So, this is part 1. Now, for those returning, I know it's definitely been a while since I did a video for this series. I think it's been around 6 months. That's because the first half of this entire season is literally the worst official Yu-Gi-Oh! Episodes ever. So, torturing myself to mull over these episodes was pretty much a Herculean task on my part. However, let's finally dive into why this arc fucking sucks. Now, Season 3 is basically Season 2 Part 2, but is claimed Season 3 solely because it's not trying to be like Attack on Titan's naming schemes and confuse the absolute shit out of anyone watching the series. The season would air March 12th, 2002 in Japan, about a week after the original airing for Season 2, so that's surprisingly quick actually. I tell ya, Yu-Gi-Oh's production is surprisingly fast, but then again, we're gonna see what happens when you have a rushed production schedule as the seasons go on. Over in America, this season wouldn't be dubbed until a year after its original Japanese airing, by airing on November 1st, 2003, the same day that Season 2 ended in America. Now, I don't know if maybe the final episode of Season 2 and the first episode of Season 3 were aired in a double feature, because there's no way in hell I'm gonna remember that small of a detail about 2003 anymore, but it seems likely, as I do recall as a kid that 2 episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh! Would air at a time. Now, as for why this season has an entire original filler story arc, I'm not really sure. It might be due to the issue with early 2000s shonen in this era, where each season has something ridiculous like 50 episodes, so maybe they had to make a whole ass season to pad out the time to fill in the contracts done for Season 3. Yeah, I'm honestly not sure why, when the Battle City arc was done quite a while before Season 3 was airing. Hell, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga was well into the Millennium World arc by the time the season was airing. Yet, surprisingly enough, for some people, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga is technically very short. However, I'll talk about the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga at a later date because I am nowhere near there yet. Now, the reaction to the Virtual World arc is a mixed basket among Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans. You had fans like me who really liked seeing Kaiba's backstory and Noah as a concept, but hated literally everything else until the Battle City arc continued. Then you had people who loved everything about this arc for some reason, and then people who started drawing ship art with Mokuba or Seto with Noah, because the Yu-Gi-Oh! Fandom really loves making outsiders question their sanity, I guess. Now for the production and fanbase reaction out the way, let's start with the story. Okay, so for those who need a very quick refresher on the plot for Battle City so far, Yugi, Yami Yugi, and the gang all join a tournament to determine who's king or queen of games. Except Yugi is entering to help Yami Yugi unlock the mysteries of his past, and because there's an evil guy named Merrick who wants to destroy the world or something, depends on which version you watch. In the middle of this tournament, with like 3 people in a coma and a crazed maniac on a fucking blimp, Kaiba decides it's a great idea to continue hosting the tournament and houses the finals for Battle City on an island, which is apparently his adopted father's old base or something. So basically this arc is going to focus a lot on Kaiba. Not a bad idea, but you're gonna see in a minute why the way this season was done to illustrate Kaiba's backstory was a really bad idea. A damn shame because I think Kaiba's backstory is super interesting. Okay, so right before landing on the island, some kind of submarine base pops up, and this kid named Noah hacks into it and the Kaiba Corp blimp to bring everyone inside. Okay, so Noah asks everyone to come inside a specific room leaving Merrick, 3 people in a coma, and Kaiba's bodyguards behind. Why didn't Merrick go on a rampage and kill everyone else? We'll never know. As they enter the room, the Big Five from the first season show up again. For those who need a reminder, they're basically Kaiba's adopted father's old employees, who are mad that they were all fired after teaming up with Pegasus in the first season to take over Kaiba Corp. Somehow, after killing them in season 1, they're revived and work for no one now. So to explain this, they now say that they didn't actually die, but were imprisoned in the virtual world. I guess think like Five Nights at Freddy's rules, where now souls can just hang around virtual worlds and computers. Yes, this is a very stupid explanation to bring back a recycled villain they've already dealt with. My only guess for why the Big Five were recycled is simply because it was just easier than writing that Noah made himself little buddies or something, which honestly would have been cooler to see like a Danganronpa another episode thing where the gang all have to beat the shit out of little kids who represent different sides of Noah or something. See, I literally thought of this at like 2 a.m. and already made the virtual world arc plot better like a million times over. Anyway, the Big Five then separate the main group and announce that they're all trapped in the virtual world now and have to duel them because the winner will be allowed to wake up from the virtual world later, except if the Big Five win, they can take over the body of the other person. In a Scooby-Doo-esque separation, we have Yugi and Yami Yugi, who somehow can't inhabit 2 different bodies in a virtual world. Taya, who has to be useful, trust me, it's still not happening. Joey, who has to use his brain, trust me, it's still not happening. And one of the more interesting groups, Duke, Serenity, and Tristan. Now, in the previous season, which I didn't mention because it would have heavily derailed, but there's a side plot where Duke and Tristan are fighting over Serenity. I still hate it because, like, I think it's always obnoxious to have a side plot where 2 people are fighting over someone like they're a carnival game to be won or some shit, but it makes Serenity have more screen time, and I think she's adorable, so I'll take what I can get here. Now, I should mention that the rules do change in the virtual world duels. You have a deck master now, which is basically just a monster you pick that has a Deus Ex Machina special ability. What is that ability? Figure it out, I guess. To be honest, this is giving me flashbacks to Duelist Kingdom, where the characters won under really stupid circumstances like, oh, the moon is out, so all dark monsters get a bonus thing. First up is Yami Yugi versus Gansley. Gansley is apparently the former vice president of Kaiba Corp, who's the second freaky fish guy in the series. To look cool because these are big stuffy businessmen, the Big Five take on the form of their deckmaster while the other ones have theirs on the side like a JoJo stand. In this one, Karibo chose Yami Yugi and he wins after finally finding out what the fuck his deckmaster does. Yeah, that's gonna be a major trope of these duels, is literally just the characters finding out what their deckmaster does. Oh, and also like a JoJo stand, characters can summon their monsters to fight guard monsters and stuff in the virtual world. The more important side of this arc is showing a little more of Kaiba's backstory, specifically how an 8 to 10-year-old Seto Kaiba tricked an asshole businessman into adopting him and his brother, which is pretty cool actually. Also, like, he and Mokuba are kind of just wandering around the virtual world, I guess, to show how close they are. One other thing happening in the background is Noah just sitting talking shit and laughing maniacally just so we know he's really evil. Next, Taya faces off against Crump, the former accountant at Kaiba Corp. This is literally so fucking boring, I'm sorry. If you ever want to know why I don't like Taya as a character, this entire duel explains it. Even when she has a moment to pick herself up and be a badass like her friends, all she can think about is just Yugi, Yugi, Yugi. Even her own damn deckmaster of Dark Magician Girl isn't even her real trump card, because that's Yugi's second trump card. I mean, if Taya is gonna have any trump card, you'd think it'd be Shining Friendship from all her damn friendship speeches. She wins though, because this arc is so bad, even Taya wins. Next is Joey, who duels against Johnson, who is a former Kaiba Corp lawyer. AKA this duel is filled to the brim with really stupid attorney jokes in the English dub. Next is Nesbit, who faces off against Tristan, Serenity, and Duke. Nesbit was the former technical engineer of military weapons at Kaiba Corp, who later helped in creating the Duel Monster VR software that Kaiba initiated. Unlike the others, who all have dueling experience, Duke is the only one here who has Duel Monsters experience, even if he mostly plays his shitty D&D ripoff. Serenity has never even played the game before, and if you remember the first episode, Tristan actually lost to Taya, so you know he's shitty too when he loses to Taya, of all people. With them fighting over Serenity, she gets confused and fucks up her turn, but Tristan sacrificed himself and dies, or something, I guess. Oh, and the Big Five put his soul in a robot monkey body because we need a goofy animal sidekick now, I guess. This is where we finally face off against Lecter, who was apparently next in line to be the CEO of Kaiba Corp before Kaiba became the CEO instead. Kaiba defeats him with ease because he's Seto Kaiba and he honestly hardly loses. Except in the meantime, Noah is brainwashing Mokuba into thinking his brother hates him. Well, this is actually just a really shitty excuse to show Kaiba's backstory because they just didn't want to follow the manga, I guess. After their parents died, Mokuba and Seto were living in an orphanage. Although it was okay there, Seto wanted a better and more secure life for his little brother, so he vowed to get them adopted. This is when Gozaburo Kaiba, the CEO of Kaiba Corp, back then, by the way, Kaiba Corp was a military-based company instead of a gaming and VR technology company. Seto sees him in particular, and I guess he saw the movie Annie last night, and decides that he'll make Gozaburo adopt him by playing a game of chess. If he proves that a little kid can beat a grown-ass man at chess, he'll adopt them, and sure enough he loses. Thus, how Seto became Seto Kaiba. Upon being adopted by Gozaburo though, he was a shitty dad and was ridiculously hard on Kaiba to a point where it quite literally broke him into a cold and ruthless personality. In one particular way to prove his worth, Gozaburo has like a 12-year-old Kaiba invest in stocks or something, and if he buys all of Kaiba Corp's stocks with a certain amount of money, then he'll win the company. Okay, so like, I really don't care for stock market shit, so basically, he convinces other companies to give him their shares through manipulation and threats like a badass. Except Mokuba, allegedly, accidentally told Gozaburo about this, and since Mokuba had the final percentage of shares needed to take over the company, Seto was pissed at his brother for this accident. Except Mokuba obviously forgives his brother because he loves his brother, so he gives him his shares anyway, so Seto officially takes over the company. And apparently, Gozaburo was so upset by this that he disappeared and died or something. I don't know, the dub is vague on that part. Then, like, apparently the twist is that Kaiba somehow convinced the Big Five to tell Gozaburo that Mokuba told him information? I don't get how the fuck they convinced him it was Mokuba, but okay. Basically, he quote-unquote tricked his brother into giving him his share. Except the major issue with this is that it makes no fucking sense. Mokuba would gladly share his shares to Kaiba, so that makes literally no sense, but okay, I guess. So apparently Noah is fed up that Mokuba won't join his side, so he makes this clone of Kaiba to just come in and yeet his brother. Still not convinced by Noah's BS, he just decides to hypnotize Mokuba, which like, why didn't you just do that from the beginning? If Noah has hypnotize powers, why didn't he just use those powers earlier on literally everyone so the Big Five can take their bodies? Do you see why this arc fucking sucks already? Well, now shit's kinda all over the place and we need to explain Noah's backstory now, so enjoy a really messy way at explaining his backstory, by the way. Oh, and also Merrick is on the loose because we can't forget about him as our main antagonist for the season, so instead of attempting murder or something, he's just gonna kinda wander around. So apparently Noah is Gozaboro's only biological child who is in the virtual world for a mysterious reason we won't find out about until a few episodes from now. Anyway, so surprise! There's a third Kaiba brother and he wants revenge because daddy replaced him. Yay! I'm not saying this is a dumb plot twist, even if it does reek of the kind of plot twist I'd see on a telenovela. I think the concept is cool, but not here. Honestly, Noah reminds me a lot of Pegasus' adopted sons from the Yu-Gi-Oh manga, as they serve a similar antagonistic standpoint of a greenish-haired son of a previous antagonist coming in for revenge against daddy. Does that make sense? Still, I would have preferred if maybe this was a solo Seto versus Noah arc, like maybe a movie or an OVA. Having everyone just kind of forced in makes this entire thing really messy and overcrowded. Like, most of the gang don't give a shit about Kaiba, and then you have Serenity who literally has no idea who he is or what's happening. I guess they were kind of just left to wander around the virtual world when the Big Five show up in Tristan's body and come in to challenge them all to a duel because, again, the Big Five still want their bodies, which, out of context, is very gross hearing 5 grown-ass businessmen say they want the bodies of a bunch of teenagers. So while Yami, Yugi, and Joey are facing off against the Big Five and a culmination of all their decks at once, Kaiba yeets off to go and try and find his brother on his own, though Taya bitched him out earlier for not letting them help out, but what's Taya gonna do, get kidnapped again? Except when Yami, Yugi, and Joey win the duel, the Big Five are sore losers and yeet themselves off without giving Tristan his body back because they're assholes. Though if you want to know what happened to the Big Five at the end of this arc, by the way, I think Noah kills them or something. I really didn't give a shit about the Big Five, so honestly, I just sort of forgot what happened. So after that bunch of bullshit, and more weird wandering around because the pacing for this season is fucking horrible, it's time for Seto versus Noah. So we're finally almost done with this stupid arc. It's this face-off where we get Noah's backstory on why he's ageless and virtual now. Noah grew up in a Victorian lifestyle for some reason and was loved by Gozaboro. Hard to picture because the man is an asshole, but okay. Except Noah was hit by a car and killed around the age of like 9 or something like that. So Gozaboro uses Kaiba Corp Deus Ex Machina technology to put Noah's functioning brain into a virtual reality. Basically, he put his kid in VR chat. And then between the duel, there's a new plot twist that Gozaboro was interested in hearing Noah's idea to put the whole world in a virtual reality. Again, when you rewatch Yu-Gi-Oh! After seeing Dark Side of Dimensions, you realize how many fucking villains would have had their way if they just waited for Seto Kaiba to go into a breakup blues. But we'll get there. Eventually. Oh, and also I should mention that Noah has this whole deck theme of Noah's Ark. To be honest, I don't really understand what this has to do with Noah other than a really dumb joke of Noah's Ark, get it? Because it's his arc! Because that's about as creative as I expect the team to get with this storyline. Except then, Noah's later trump card turns into Shinato because he views himself as a god, I guess. A little too on the nose, but okay. Oh, and when people lose this duel between Yami, Yugi, and Noah now, they turn to stone because it was probably the only excuse the writers could think of to shut up the cheerleader squad long enough for Noah to do another villain monologue. On the plus side, Mokuba broke out of Noah's spell with the power of brotherly love, so that's sweet at least. I swear the saving grace of this entire storyline so far has just been how much Kaiba loves the shit out of his little brother. Since Kaiba lost the previous duel, Yamayugi steps up to the plate because he's the protagonist and beats the shit out of Noah with the power of friendship or something. Noah loses and he's still being a bitch about not giving Tristan's body back when Gozaburo Wizard of Oz's himself in to give another plot twist that he was alive the whole time in the same virtual world and just waited for a cool dramatic entrance, I guess. So then it turns out Gozaburo ran away to digitize his mind to just copy Noah's plan, I guess? And then the whole reason he adopted Seto is to challenge Noah, but then he realizes his son would never be emotionally mature, so he kind of just gave up and made Seto his successor anyway? What the hell is with this season and weird plot twists that make no sense? Just say he thought Seto was a better CEO because he's more ambitious and easier to beat the shit out of physically and call it a day. So then Noah pretends to help everyone escape and defeat Gozaburo from the outside so he can take someone's body and exist in the real world. Oh, by the way, apparently Merrick has been sitting at this fucking door for possible days trying to figure out the password, only for security bots to come in and Merrick to kill them, just so we all remember he's the antagonist. Again. Back in the virtual world, Noah pretends to transport everyone back to reality, except he put everyone into another virtual reality that makes them all relive the previous arc. Well, Noah lures Mokuba alone so he can take his body. Now in the real world, Noah goes into the base and programs Gozaburo's war satellite to destroy the base instead of teleporting the whole world into the virtual world. Oh, and also Merrick is just destroying the power sources again to remind us he's the main villain and he's still here. Back in the virtual world, Kaiba faces off against Gozaburo, which, again, Kaiba's family issues is literally the saving grace. I don't know, it's just nice seeing him talk shit and humiliate his extremely abusive adopted father. Gives him a bit of closure on that chapter of his life to me, I guess. Back in the real world, Noah feels really guilty now because Mokuba is a really sweet kid, so he warns them all back in the virtual world that the place is gonna blow up in 20 minutes. So they have to run the fuck away and find a portal to get back into the real world. The cheerleader squad make it out, but Yugi stays behind to help Kaiba get out of the duel with his stepfather, and I think find Mokuba so he and Noah can switch bodies back. Luckily, Kaiba just won the duel for Yugi to help him escape, except now Gozaburo is going full monster mode for some reason and tries to attack Kaiba. So while the missile is literally coming down onto the base, Noah gives Mokuba his body back and goes back to the virtual world to pin Gozaburo down so they can be destroyed together in a scene that really does look like it was ripped off from Evangelion. Barely managing to make it onto the blimp to get the hell out of there. Also, Merrick somehow got back on the blimp at some point off screen. They run the fuck away. Oh, and also Gozaburo somehow made it to the real world as a fiery explosion. This is so fucking dumb, but I'll let it slide because they were really trying to end this arc with a bang, I guess. Now escaping, Kaiba and the gang finally head to the island for the Battle City finals. And this is where I'm ending the story because this arc was so fucking long that it had to be its own video. This arc was a gosh damn dumpster fire garbage piece of shit filler. I've seen more entertaining and sensical filler arc ideas in doujinshi than in this arc. See, the biggest issue I have is the pacing, its constant need for plot twists to keep the audience engaged, and just wasting the potential of a storyline like this later down the road. Hell, I like Season 4 and the first half of Season 5 more than I do this filler arc. And that's saying a lot when the Champion arc is literally just the last slice of life adventure before the finale. In the beginning, there's this whole stupid mystery that they don't think they're in the virtual world when of course they're in the virtual world, duh. What do you think, the big five are suddenly shapeshifters? And then there's this whole thing about constantly going here's this thing that happened, oh surprise bitch, this was the real motivation. It's just really stupid. Next is the pacing. These duels should be bonehead simple for Joey, Yugi, Kaiba, Duke, and even Taya to win, and not need 2.5 episodes. Meanwhile, the story bits that actually would have been interesting are just thrown away dialogue or very brief flashbacks that honestly deserve to be fleshed out more. Finally is the poor placing of this arc. This is in the middle of Battle City's finale. 3 people are in a coma and a crazed maniac is just chilling around. We do not have time for Ready Player One's anime adaptation right now. If it was put after Battle City and give it more time, I can see this working. Honestly, it would be kinda interesting to have every ending arc prior to a really big one be about Kaiba so you can view him less as an antagonist and more as a morally gray rival. Some complain this arc is also too sci-fi for Yu-Gi-Oh!, but remember that literally everything Kaiba does is too sci-fi for Yu-Gi-Oh!, so I don't see that as a problem. Overall, this arc is bad and I hate it. For as much as I don't like this arc, I can't help but admit that the animation style for this one is my favorite in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! You're gonna see this style really hit its peak in the later half of Season 3, but I love the sharper angles the storyboarders took this time. Not to mention some pretty cool angles and shots that were surprisingly well animated. Also, hey, look at that consistency and art style in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime for once. That's pretty impressive. This is a filler arc, so most would expect the budget to be absolute ass, but I guess this is where the money for the final season went. Once we get there, because like I said, it's real bad. The color palette isn't terrible either. Thanks to it being a virtual world where literally every scenery is possible, we get a lot of variety in scenery, so we get different color varieties. This is, again, really cool to me. I specifically liked seeing Noah and Kaiba's duel because of how much it plays with environments throughout the entire duel. Though some duels were still in a boring setting. The duel with the Big Five Tristan, Yamayugi, and Joey in particular was kind of boring because it was just a desert. Still, I did love the visual design for this part of the season, so I'll give it praise where it's needed. I won't be going over the previous cast, which is Yamayugi, Kaiba, Mokuba, and everyone else, so if you want to see my opinions on them again, I highly recommend checking out the previous videos. What I will be doing though is going over the new characters we encounter this season. The Big Five. Now, we did see them at the end of the first season of Yu-Gi-Oh!, but we didn't see their faces or personalities. I'm grouping them all together because, to be honest, they're very one note to a point where they honestly feel like a hive mind more than separate characters. They're boring, bad, and I hate them. They're also kind of creepy. Gozaburo. Although an interesting character in that he was a fucking asshole to all 3 of his children, he is definitely someone to hate. Though I feel like he wasn't fleshed out enough, like we don't even know how he treated Mokuba, and where did his presumed wife or mother of Noah go? I would bring up family pictures, but Gozaburo does feel like that asshole parent who would throw away any pictures of his kid if they didn't meet his expectations. Noah. Do I like Noah as a concept? Yes. Noah is a very interesting character in theory. I think the concept of an immortal child and watching an immature mind twist with adult intellect is absolutely fascinating to me as a subject because of how unique each writer takes that approach. Do I like Noah as a character? Absolutely not. Noah is bitchy, whiny, surprisingly stupid, and overall just feels like he has no personality other than serving someone else. Whether that be Gozaburo's puppet or Mokuba's new bro. He just feels like a spoiled brat without the heart. Overall, the new characters are all pretty meh. Luckily, the later half of Season 3 will all be returning characters, so we won't be diving into new characters again until Season 4. In the original, Kaiba first believes that the hacking is coming from the ghost of Gozaburo. Just a little reminder that Kaiba isn't as skeptical of her magic and ghosts in the original. There's actually a better explanation to how Kaiba and Mokuba's parents died. Their mom died of a possible illness, and their father died in an accident a few years later. I guess they must have come from halfway decent money, because their relatives only wanted their inheritance, so one of them took them in to take their inheritance for themselves and then abandoned them in an orphanage. There's also a whole scene of Mokuba in the park watching kids play with their parents. The dub changed this to where he just sat in the orphanage playground all day. There's another cut line of dialogue where Noah explains that he thinks Kaiba isn't fit to be CEO of Kaiba Corp because he's too emotionally driven, while Noah thinks he's superior because he's not sentimental. In the original, Kaiba explains a little better how he won against Gozaburo. He basically watched Gozaboro's moves on television like crazy and studied it as a trap to copy his gameplay style until he let his guard down enough to beat him. It's really smart, and it's a shame the dub didn't keep this in because it's really cool hearing how calm and collected Kaiba was mentally even at a young age. Cuts, blood, and other imagery like that in names are all removed. There's a scene where Taya is nicked by a piece of wood or something, and it shows a visible cut, but it's removed in the dub. It was basically to show that this virtual world is a lot more advanced than the last time they were in it, because now cuts and bruises kind of like physically appear or something. In the original version, Kaiba comments that the cards Mokuba gave him were trash, but he loves how well-meaning his brother is for giving them to him. Except when he sees the Blue Eyes White Dragon card his brother made him, it made him want to be the best brother he can be for Mokuba. Noah's plan is explained a lot better in the original too. Noah uses simulations to explain that Kaiba Corp's war technology could be used to destroy the entire world in 30 days, with only 3% of the population surviving. Gozaburo is both curious and disturbed by this, so he asks Noah why so many casualties, and he basically says he doesn't care about casualties because he surpassed human empathy and believes this is a completely logical conclusion. Kaiba is actually the one to point out the competition between the two of them set up by Gozaburo and explains that the reason Noah would never inherit the company is because he thinks like a machine. I forgot to mention earlier that they also explain why Kaiba is so attached to Blue Eyes. To him, it's a symbol of how high he wants to go in achievements so he can be the best big brother ever. It's really sweet and really damn weird the dub didn't keep this in because this is really adorable. Noah as a character is admittedly a lot more tolerable in the original compared to the dub. He speaks in a softer and more well-spoken speech instead of giving stereotypical "I deserve it" speech. He explains that because he's part AI, he's better than everyone else and deserves to be at the top because he views himself as the ultimate life form, as someone who walks the line of man and machine. In the original, Noah didn't know about Gozaburo being alive in the virtual world either, so his excitement was actually happiness to see his father, who basically said he was useless. Also, that the real plot twist was that Seto was actually adopted to be a body for Noah, except he was so ashamed that Seto took over the company from under him that he basically gave up the idea and took his own life, but transferred himself into the digital world before doing that. There's also a cutscene of Gozaburo attacking Noah in the virtual world, and it's also explained that Noah cut off the gateways for Gozaburo to hack into the blimp and other areas of Kaiba Corp's network. Noah also explains that he's trapping Gozaburo because he wants them to die together because he realizes all he ever wanted is his father, no matter how shitty he was. Noah being shirtless when he embraces Gozaburo is also censored by making it look like he has a shirt on, but it's really badly edited. There's also an altered clip of Mokuba holding flowers to mourn that Noah died. I don't know where he got those flowers, but let's hope it's not from any of the coma patients on the blimp, or else he'll look like a real asshole. Finally, the only really big notable changes left is that the big five all have different names. Gansley is Konosuke Oshita. Crump is Shizo Otaki, whose profession was changed from personnel manager to accountant in the dub. Johnson is Chizuken Oka, Nesbit is Soichiro Ota, and Lecter is Kogoro Daimon. There's also a joke with their names in that the kanji for their names translates to big, which I thought was kind of cute. Other than that, I feel like this is the least changed dub out of all of Yu-Gi-Oh! So far. Hell, I noticed almost word for word dialogue was used sometimes, even if the line was read as cheesy as humanly possible. Not a bad job, I'd say. Though the choice of Noah was fucking awful. Is it me, or does Noah sound like Mandark from Dexter's Laboratory? Like, I would not be surprised if that similarity was intentional, because 4Kids really liked putting random references through dialogue and voice acting direction. Overall, not that bad in changes this time. It sounds like a lot, but honestly not bad. I was actually kind of impressed as I went back and forth between the dub and sub for this review. I noticed some pretty minimal changes. Although the dub is pretty accurate as far as 4Kids standards go and the animation was pretty good in a lot of places, this Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc is honestly shit. Although there are some really cool concepts in it, it either drags on for way too long, or the parts that had potential to be interesting are way too short. Along with that, Noah is an insufferable character. Even if the original makes him a little more tolerable, he is still a very obnoxious character, which is a shame because, like I said earlier, I really like this concept. I just wish it could have been done better. If I was doing this, I think I would have made this whole series of OVAs with just Kaiba and Mokuba. No big five either, just let this be a fun OVA to show how Kaiba and Mokuba are badass on their own without Yugi, Yami-Yugi, and the others. No Kozaburo popping out of nowhere, just a pure Noah versus Kaiba brothers OVA that could explain their backstories in better detail. Also changed Noah's personality to be a little more likable. I personally would have chosen something like a sweet character who doesn't understand what he's doing is wrong because he's not emotionally mature enough to have a real moral compass. Oh, and also changed that damn dub voice to literally anyone else but bootleg Mandark. Just a reminder that this is part 1 of a 2-part review for Season 3. As you can see, this video is pretty damn long, so in part 2 we'll be going back to Battle City to finally discuss the finals and who will win and be the title of King of Games. I mean, we all know who's gonna win, but let's pretend like we don't. Did you guys like the Virtual World arc? I know this is a pretty split arc among Yu-Gi-Oh fans, so I'm curious to see if you guys are torn too. And of course, if you're hyped for part 2, let me know down below. Hey guys, thanks for watching! If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you're new. If any of you would like to help support my channel in any possible way, my Ko-fi page is down below in the description, along with all of my social media. For any subscribers, new or old, who'd like to help with video ideas, or maybe just want to talk about anime or something, I have a fan server linked down below. See you next time!